All right, you ready to talk some monkeys and peewees?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
What
Yeah,
do
yeah, I guess.
I know you've got a lot of notes there.
I do.
I got to tell you, this is probably the best beer you've chosen for a serial killer with Dirty Bastard Founders. Dark, is it dark? Dark ale?
It's
Real
a
dark?
little darker. It's going to be darker than last week for sure. Eileen Warnos is a little bit more lighthearted, I guess you could say, than
Well, compared to what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to say it's a lot
today.
lighthearted. The beer went really good. Let's see here. Where's your... Oh, that is a little dark. Ooh, it's root beery.
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of coppery. Kind of an amberish type beer. Actually, not too bad. Pretty even on the palate. A little smoky, kind of sweet. And it's got a little bit of booziness kind of at the forefront and then kind of mellows out. It's good.
What are we looking at with the alcohol by volume on this thing?
Alcohol by volume on this guy runs us about 8.5%.
And bitterness?
50%, or 50 IBUs rather. And as a little quick side note for the IBUs thing, a little bit of a correction or a little bit of an addition to over the last couple of weeks we've been talking about IBUs. IBUs stands for International Bitterness Unit. And what it is it's rated on a scale of 5 to 120 on the bitterness of the beer. 5 being the lowest, 120 being the absolute highest that they rated at. And then just as like a quick little note on that, it doesn't always indicate the type or the type of beer that it is isn't always an indication of how bitter it's going to be. For instance, this is a 50 IBU ale, like a regular red ale. There could be 60 IBU red ales and like 55 IBU pale ales, and the pale ale might be more bitter because of how it's made.
All right. You said 50, so how high does it go?
120.
120?
So we're mid. We're kind of
halfway
below
there.
mid. Below
Little,
mid, yeah.
Little. It's very tasty, immediately bitter.
Yeah?
Yeah. But, I think, like I said, I think you've spoiled me. My palate's a lot better. I don't... that bitterness really goes away pretty quick with me now.
Yeah, it's really full. It's like a really full taste. It isn't super refreshing, but it isn't really overbearing or weighted like a lot of the darker ones are.
Yeah, and it's got kind of a like a earthy taste to it.
Yeah, a little bit.
Not now sometimes you can taste that the hops.
Right.
I don't really get that.
Not so much. You get more of like the kind of, like I said, kind of like a sweet kind of peat kind of flavor, kind of woodsy, kind of smoky. Yeah, it's good. It's a good, well-rounded beer. Yeah, I'm going to have to say I'm going to pat myself on the back for this one. I feel like I kind of knocked it out of the park as far as the description goes for this.
It was
good. We're going to do the old-fashioned pioneer dirty bastard himself.
Oh,
I believe it's your favorite.
yes, it is. Of all of them, just because I think he really just basically encompasses everything that serial killers are.
Right.
And really should be, I think,
Right.
because he scares the shit out of everybody.
Oh,
In
yeah.
fact, he's called the boogeyman, right?
Or the werewolf of Wisteria.
Or he was also, they thought he was Dracula of Brooklyn.
Could be. He was the Gray Man.
Gray Man, that was the movie.
Nah. Or the Moon Maniac.
I didn't hear the Moon Maniac.
Moon Maniac.
What is that
Not
one
a really
about?
common one, but it's been one that's been kind of tossed around.
How did he get that name?
I don't know.
Oh, you didn't find out? You didn't research
No,
it?
I never really looked that deep into it. Like, to be honest, like there's I figured we'll keep it more of kind of what you know to kind of retain it, but I really couldn't find much information on the Moon Maniac stuff. I think one lady had mentioned it one time in an interview, and in case you haven't guessed it today, we're gonna cover Mr. OG himself, Mr. Hamilton Howard,
Ham and
Albert
eggs.
Fish,
Ham and eggs.
Mr. Albert Fish.
Yeah. This is a different kind of serial killer because he really only got convicted of one.
And then he confessed to 2 more
So he confessed to 3, right?
overall. Yeah.
But he was suspected of 5.
Correct. And he claims, oh my God, this fucking grosses me out, that he had kids in every state.
Is that what he claimed?
That's what he claimed.
So just alone, if that's true, what are we looking at in the at that time? What 50, 52, 50?
50 plus, but I know for sure that, I mean, he was a convicted, no, not, I don't think he was ever convicted, but he was a child molester for sure. That was one thing that he loved that. And he talked about it a lot.
Oh yeah.
He loved boys. He loved little girls. He just loved kids, and he loved to touch them inappropriately.
Right.
And more specifically, he loved for them to touch him inappropriately.
Yeah, the inappropriateness for this guy is at a 10. Just beyond the inappropriateness. When we look back at the serial killers we've talked about already so far, Anthony Swoll and Monster, Eileen Wuornos, they're very definitive and very direct in how they're going to kill you.
Right.
They don't really go above and beyond. There's some dismemberment with Swoll, but Eileen was just angry and murdering the fuck out of people. This guy, he's on a whole different plane of absolute fucking crazy.
It's weird is that he has a clear, though. He also has a clear escalation path.
Oh yeah.
In all the research and everything that I've found, it's a very clear escalation for him. Like it's no fucking wonder, but also like, why would anybody let this dude near kids, even with his first wife when he was like, what, 28? Why would anyone have even let him near kids at that point in time? It just fucking boggles my mind.
I think at the time, it just was a different time altogether. I mean, even when you look at some of the pictures that he had during his trial, I mean, they're walking through the courtroom. He has no handcuffs on. He's basically allowing them to hold him. He's putting his hands in the handcuff position. But I'm trying to fathom where this takes place. And as I go back in his life, so his dad, when he's born, his dad's 75 fucking years old.
Right. 43 years older than his mom.
Right. And so when his dad dies 5 years later, you've got little, ham and eggs here, fish, and get sent off to the orphanage.
Right. His mom couldn't take care of him. So she says.
Which
she didn't have a job to support him. Well, he wasn't the only one, though. He did have a brother, and I think he had two brothers and a sister.
Yes.
But he wasn't the only one. And they don't really, anything that you read about his life doesn't really give any kind of description of his family. And I wonder if that is more of out of like respect for distance kind of thing for them. Like they didn't want anything to do with this motherfucker at the end of it, which I totally understand after doing all of this fucking research.
Yeah.
But he claims it started when he was in the orphanage. When he claims that he was abused by older boys.
Yeah.
And he watched boys abuse older boys, and that's where he learned what he would probably describe as the beautiful art of sodomy.
Well, not just sodomy, straight up sadomasochistic issues. Because he's not only involved in sodomy and rape, he's a willing participant.
Oh yeah.
Plus he's taking the beatings from the orphanage people, which are probably nuns.
And he says that over time a lot of them were men though. It's weird. But he says that over time he just learned to really enjoy it. Like he enjoyed getting in trouble.
Well, I know that there's something that he had said about early on when he was getting beat up and even, I don't know, disciplined or just beat altogether, he would get an erection.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm thinking to myself sometime, I'm pretty fucking freaky. But I don't know that I could think to myself, what would be good right now? A good ass beating.
Yeah, I would love it if someone put a bunch of nails on a paddle and just put it right in my ass.
Yeah.
I don't think I like any of that.
None of that. I don't know if it was a mechanism of him coping, of him being able to say, I can take this beating, so now I'm going to enjoy it, and taking back the ownership of it and saying, you're not going to break me. I'm going to enjoy it, right. And the more you do it, the harder I'm going to get.
And you can I can understand that. I guess there's like a mental break for that to happen. I'm sure he felt abandoned. He was a child, when his mom basically sent him to the orphanage. I'm sure that he felt abandoned by that, and I'm sure he wanted to find a way to cope. And being stuck in the situation that he was in, it was either like sink or swim. And I think that it was just he was the right amount of fucking crazy that it worked in his favor.
I think it's kind of cool that he's like You beat me up, I get hard. No matter what you do, it's arousing.
Let's see what's really messed up, bro.
Yeah, and then the kids get darker and darker, and he's like, "This is amazing. I keep getting harder and harder.
I love this. This is great."
So it just before that, I think he's in there 4 years, and just before that, he falls from a tree. Right, he fucks his head up. He develops a stutter. So now they're just fucking with him more. So now he's being called, ham and eggs. He goes to Albert Fish, I think, which is after his deceased brother, right?
Correct.
Albert. And subsequently, he names his son
Albert
Fish. That's a fucked up lineage to have at that point. So I do know, in 1890, he goes to New York. His mom gets all the kids back out. She lands on her feet, and they land in New York.
Right.
And it's in New York that he decides, I'm just going to fucking go prostitute myself around.
So a little bit before that, when he's, I think, around the age of 12, this was like, he was born in 1870s, like 1882, I think, the way the timeline breaks down. Dude starts kind of a sado / homosexual relationship with like a paper boy or something like that. And that dude was into some freaky shit too. And the only reason that I'm bringing this up is at the end, there's a lot said about his sanity, and it plays into it. But apparently this guy taught him what he called the finer things, which was drinking a lot of piss and eating a lot of feces.
Yes.
Which is fucking disgusting.
Now, if I remember correctly, I believe that's actually when he gets out of the...
That's out of the orphanage.
Out of the
orphanage. That is out.
orphanage.
So that's like an in-between. So he's like 12. I think that's pre NYC, because I think that I've got the timeline listed. In his early adulthood, so like 1890 was right. That's when he started prostituting in New York City.
So, I mean, just imagine that kind of fucking friendship start. Who brings it up first?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, let's go throw a football, right? And, oh, hey, by the way, you ever taste piss?
Oh, that's cool. I'm really thirsty. Maybe later when we have a snack, you can just shit right into my mouth.
Yeah, because I'm hungry.
What the fuck?
But again, I think going back to that orphanage, he's so used to the fucking crazy shit that goes on. He's looking for the absolute next high of adrenaline,
which is something that we've talked about
in the past
a couple of times. Yeah. You got to chase that next thing. Well, I forget what we used for an example, but you can't be tied up and get rock fucking hard being tied up and then being beaten and then go back and be like, I just want to have vanilla sex. You can't do it.
Can you just kiss my mouth?
Yeah.
French kiss and that's it.
Missionary only.
Yeah.
That's like all I want. Right.
You're beyond. You're pushing that high.
You can't do it.
Yeah. You're holding on to the tail of the dragon at that point. So in the 1890s, he goes to New York. It's at this point that he gets into, like we said, but he's also admitted that he starts to actively be molesting children under 6.
And he starts to groom kids.
That's what I found interesting. Even back then, the grooming process, in all this time, over 100 years, has never changed as far as how you groom the children.
And I actually think that, kind of fucking crazily enough, he may be like, I guess, the predecessor to all of that. Not to all of it. Not to all of it. Yeah. Not to all of it, but like, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird because like, I don't know. There's really no one like him before him. So it's weird.
Yeah.
It's fucking weird.
He generates everything. He's like the facilitator of everything that is wrong with child molesters. And it's like he wrote a textbook for child molesters that they still follow to this day.
Oh, yeah. Like some like fucking fucked up Mein Kampf bullshit that they've got like hidden away, tucked back in the dark corner of their house. Like, oh, this is how I'll do it.
Yeah. He's the true dark web of the 1800s.
He's a fucking monster.
So one of the things he does that I thought was kind of comical, and I'm not going to lie, I probably would have done it myself in my early stages. And then he just starts writing random dirty letters to women who post classified sex. You know
so
what I
it's
mean?
It's kind of like the early version of like crank calling.
Yeah.
It's like exactly that. So like he, instead of dialing up like, oh, is your refrigerator running? It's like, oh, you're fucking lonely? Well, guess what? I'm going to fucking rape you and fucking annihilate your pussy. I'm going to fucking murder you. And then like through a letter though, so they get to look at that forever.
Yeah.
That's fucking horrifying.
So he's like the pioneer of a lot of things that we're finding out now. we've got a pioneer of sadist, child molestation, grooming, and basically beginning stages of a creeper in the best context. Because he's just finding, classifieds for women who probably are not looking like, I guess the equivalent of what would be Tinder now.
Yeah, it would be kind of like Tinder, yeah.
Can you imagine if
Christian Mingle.
I swipe right to this guy and he sends me back this fucked up letter.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. No, it's crazy though, because I think that he, like I said, like in a clear escalation kind of thing, there was like, I mean, what else could he do that would be crazier than that? That was just like something that he liked to do on the side, like a hobby. And he did that almost his whole life, which is really fucking weird. And it plays into his famous Grace Blood letter, kind of.
Yeah,
because he has an affinity for writing letters.
He loves writing letters.
That's his thing.
It's his way of still gaining control of what's going on.
Yeah, but it's like a way for him to communicate with you intimately too. Yeah. And so like it's weird. Yeah. It's super weird because he is a fucking monster. Oh. This dude is a boogeyman, honestly.
He is 100% crazy in every way. And I keep thinking to myself, if you fast forward to where we're at now in 2019, in 2019, and here's this guy on Tinder, and he's like, hey, my name's Albert Fish, I'm Sagittarius, I like to be pissed on, and I eat shit. And he's hoping that somebody's gonna say, that's the kind of guy I'm looking for.
Damn,
right there.
That's crazy because I like shitting on people's faces. Oh, how weird is that?
Yeah. I believe there's a website for that.
Oh, man, there probably is, to be honest.
So, it's, during that time, he's really, really fucking working by his own admission. So, 8 years later, his mom hooks him up with his future wife, who's like 9 years younger, right. I think.
Yeah, she's pretty young. He also starts painting. So, he starts like house painting, which if we get to the point we started talking to people like, or talking about people like Andrew Chikatilo,
yeah,
or, even like that fucking stupid piece of shit romanticized fucking Ted Bundy right now.
Oh my God. Don't even get me started on that guy.
It was like the perfect way for him to be places that were close to kids and almost not be suspect, which is kind of weird. But yeah, 1898. So I'm going to kind of we'll kind of help keep a timeline too, because I think it's really interesting, like how far this goes. But, he does marry. It's an arranged marriage, someone that his mom wants him to marry. Her name is Mary Ann Hoffman. I don't know that matters, but they were together for a short time. They had 6 kids, 6 fucking kids
in a short time. Now he does he professes that he didn't stop any of his escapades during this time frame.
No, and it's funny because I kind of have a weird addition to that when we kind of get more into like the detail of the shitty stuff that he does. But his kids, I think, play a role in a lot of
it's funny message. Because at no time was there any evidence that he abused his own children. Now, he did have them because as we move forward in the timeline, her name's Anna Marie. It goes, she actually leaves him for a fucking goddamn painter or somebody like,
it was like a handyman or something.
Yeah,
it was a handyman. And I guess he lived with him. He was
important. Yeah. And so she's like, I'm out. I don't want these 6 kids. I don't want your crazy ass. And I'm out. So it's during this time frame that one of his buddies takes him to a wax museum, right? Mm-hmm. And
well, you say buddy, but they were buddies. They were buddies.
Yeah, they were both switch hitting at that point. But so as this is occurring,
Albert Fish, I imagine Albert Fish is a real fucking power bottom. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A power bottom. That's awesome.
That's fucking disgusting.
You've offended everyone in every letter of the alphabet of the LGBT
Hey man,
community.
We're just gonna keep going.
So basically, he goes to this waxy museum. He sees a dissected penis, which I think he becomes infatuated with this. And it just, again, he's chasing that fucking high of what he can do.
Yeah, and it's almost as if it clicks like, oh, man, I didn't know you could do this. Like, I didn't know this could happen,
Right.
And I think that kind of opened him up. He wanted to experiment more, and now he saw, like, it's almost as if before this point he saw the human body as something to be played with, something to be touched and molded, but never something to be broken. And when he saw this, he said, oh, we can get inside of this.
Yeah, there's another
like
level.
we can get inside of this machine or whatever this is.
To him, it was level up. And also during this time frame is when he does something very significant that will play a role towards his execution at the end, which is he starts inserting fucking needles into his scrot.
So that
What?
yeah,
Take
he
that
really
in
like that.
for a
He's like
minute.
the human pincushion.
Yeah,
so,
take that in. You're bored at home and you're thinking of crazy shit to do, and you say to yourself, I'm not just going to poke myself with them. I'm going to insert them and leave them in.
I'm just gonna fill my beanbag with needles.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was gonna
cushion.
I was kind of gonna wait until we got to a certain point, but this actually brings. I guess logically this makes sense. I think that some of his escalation, especially to the point where he was inserting that stuff, because they talk about his abdomen too, which is really weird because they don't necessarily have proof of that. It's just what he said. When they catch him later, they didn't even know that he had all those pins in his nutsack until he was executed, which is really fucking weird. But I feel like this is what happened. He got his kids, and I feel like he lost some free time, and I feel like he knew, when obviously we know that he knew he liked kids, but he couldn't touch his own. I feel like that was like a line that he couldn't cross, and like I mentioned before, with him feeling like the body was something to be sculpted, something to be touched but not to be broken. He viewed his kids in the same way, to a sense where he couldn't cross that line. But I feel like this makes me hurt just thinking about it. I feel like he did almost want to cross that line, and that's why he started on himself more viciously than he had ever done before, was because his kids were around him all the time and he couldn't touch them.
And that was his way of stopping himself from crossing that line.
But still getting what he wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
And also at that time, remember, that's when he starts with the paddle with the nails and telling his kids to spank him. So I agree with you, because that is direct result of him saying, I'm a bad person. Come beat me before I hurt you.
Right. And even like it comes down to the point where his oldest son is just sick of his shit and fucking kicks his ass out.
Yeah.
Which leads to a whole new mess of problems. But if we get back to the timeline, so 1910 is when...
1903, he goes to Sing Sing.
That's true.
And
For
that's
larceny.
important.
Larceny.
He goes in there for larceny, embezzlement or something. But the reason I think that that's significant is because now he's in a fucking, basically a fucking hotel of men, and he just engaging in everything possible.
It's like Candyland for him.
Right.
This is the way he described it. He said he had a lot of sex with men while he was in Sing Sing.
Yes. So part of and this is really not as significant as you think, but he goes to Sing Sing, which is still open, by the way, and still active. But he goes there, but when he comes out is when this is the teeter-totter moment of him being sane or insane, because he starts thinking he's John the Apostle, right? Or talking to him.
Well, this is when his wife leaves him. And he claims that when she left, he started having like auditory hallucinations, where he started really hearing shit that was kind of weird, and he claims that he heard John the Apostle telling him that he needed to fucking molest kids. Right. So he like wrapped himself up in a carpet, which is like a famous story for him, I guess. Wrapped himself up in a carpet on the floor and just like screamed about John the Apostle, trying to like tell him to like fucking rape kids.
Told him to do this.
But that actually happens in 1917, 1918. So after he Sing Sing, he obviously has a thing for dudes. But now I think he starts to wonder if he has a thing for older men, because this is when he starts in on Thomas Kedden. Thomas Kedden is the same guy that he goes to that wax museum with that sees that dick cut in half. Yeah. And ironically enough, unfortunately for Thomas Kedden, he also has his dick cut in half by Albert Fish.
He gets freaked out, right? Because he ends up surviving and leaves.
So he originally had planned on killing him, I think. He and this guy, which I guess it came out later on that he was mentally incapable, I guess, or handicapped to an extent. They started into this masochistic relationship, and he basically, over the span of a couple of weeks, he and this guy like lock themselves in and start fucking each other like a lot. And then he takes this guy to an abandoned farmhouse, is what he tells him. and basically chains him up and tortures him for over the span of like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Which at some point do you tell yourself who's fucking crazier
what's
than the other?
What's weird is that it says 10 days, and in one article I read it said 2 business weeks, and I thought that was really fucking inappropriate, but really funny too, because he was at the time he was painting and stuff. So like you got to imagine that was kind of probably playing a role in this stuff. But he tied this dude up and then he tortured him, proceeded to mutilate his genitals. He cut him in half, and he
didn't
said
kill
that
him, though.
No, he said that he will never forget his screams and the way that he looked at him as if he was being betrayed. And Albert Fish couldn't go any further than that. So he took a Vaseline and a handkerchief and wrapped it around this dude's dick, gave him a $10 bill and a kiss, and took off.
I'm telling you, like that's like you and I robbing banks, and then me robbing you. You know what I mean? Like,
and then
I'm like, deuces, I'm out.
Later, bro.
Because like what does that guy say to Albert Fish? Hey, let's go to this abandoned house and fuck. Somebody's not going to come out of there okay. And it's not going to be Albert Fish.
What's funny is that Albert Fish is like, I know we don't know a lot about him because there isn't a lot about him personally. Like, he didn't keep a journal, really. He wasn't like in the public eye because he died in the 30s.
Right.
He wasn't documented as well, except for his letters and a little bit of what happened while he was in the courtroom. But I feel like this guy was almost a precursor to like somebody like Bundy because of how I feel like he would have had to have been a master manipulator. He had to be.
Well, I think he had age on his side. He was a simple looking man.
Experience.
He was experienced. He had already been to prison. I think people just genuinely trusted him. And I think that's how, as we go through this, even with the serial killers that we've already done, think about it. They engage the victim's trust and then they attack.
Right.
It's never, very rarely, I think in like John Wayne Gacy or some of those will actually kidnap. And I think Albert Fish does do that later on. But at this point, he's really honing in his skills to be able to, the power of persuasion.
What's interesting is there is like, really, there are 2 situations in which he tries to kidnap. The first one, he fails. The second one, he gets away with it, but he's seen, which I think is really funny. And I think that he's a quick learner. He's a quick learner in the sense that he tried to do this shit, then he was like, it's really hard to get away with this, so I'm not going to do it anymore.
Right.
Instead I'm going to go right to your fucking doorstep, and I'm going to make that happen, which plays a big role in, obviously, his famous Grace Budd letter, who we will probably talk about quite a bit, because it really is like the
that was
epitome.
the nail in the coffin, not nail in the nuts. That's so when we go back to the Thomas Keaton, that was about 1910-ish. 1917 is pretty significant because this is where, again, the shit that crosses this guy's mind, he's pushing the limits. He starts to eat raw meat. And he's serving it to the kids.
Almost as if, like, to impose himself on everything around him.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird, I guess, in his way, because it doesn't seem like he's the type to do that up to this point. But he was trying... he already had an idea that he wanted to taste human flesh. We'll put it right there, because we know it. Later on, he talks about it in a letter. We know that he wants to taste human flesh. I think this is him consciously deciding that he wants to try the extent of what he can get before he knows for sure that he wants to cross that boundary.
Yeah.
This dude is like the pure fucking definition of completely sane, insane.
Absolutely. He knows exactly what he's doing. And I know there's doctors out there that'll say, he's fucking clinically crazy or whatever. But he's actively pushing these limits. I love steak. I eat my steak medium rare, which some people would find disgusting. And when I was doing the research, and I knew some stuff about Albert Fish before I did the research, but when I found out that he was just eating raw meat, one day a buddy of mine and I, the wives, we all went out and I had my steak, and he asked for a rare steak. And they served it. And I could not believe how rare this fucking steak was.
Oh, yeah.
And to think about eating raw meat in general, cow,
Right.
you know, it's pushing the limits.
A little bit.
But to then cross over to a person, and people are like, well, you eat a cow and you look at the cow in the eyes, yeah, but it's a fucking good burger. I don't think like that in terms of a guy,
Right?
You know, like a person,
right.
Like that guy across the street looks like he'd make a good fucking burger,
Which is what this guy eventually did with kids, where he was like, oh, that's
and he loved the ass.
That
he
little
loved
butt
the rump.
looks so good. I can't wait to eat it, which is fucking horrifying, man. I don't like this guy. I don't like this guy. I don't like this guy.
It makes
at
you a
all.
little uncomfortable
It does.
inside.
It kind of really does. It makes you feel like really dirty, and it just people like this existed, man. And what's really weird about it is, I had a hard time, you know, and on the days that I was doing a lot of research into this or like reading a lot about it, accepting that into reality,
Right.
because of how fucking outrageous it is. Like. And that's something that that really I just don't like. I don't fathom how this line is crossed. How your world can just become so like
Enthralled
fucking horrifying.
Yeah. And for later on when we talk about William King, which is the lead homicide detective in this case, you have a young child. My boys are older now, but you're processing exactly what this guy is doing. Yeah. And you're thinking to yourself as you look over, you're like, you know, I don't get it. But if you look at the stages that he's going through, he's pushing those limits and he's breaking down those doors and he keeps going further and further and further down the rabbit hole.
What's funny is like as he gets older, this happens. Like these are his victims and this is him. It's really fucking scary, dude. Right. And like it's funny because I was like, my wife was like, hey, who are you researching? And I felt like, I don't know if you've ever seen Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, but I was like, you don't want none of this shit?
You don't want none of this shit right now.
She's like, I think I want to know. And I was like, you don't want to know.
Well, it's funny you say that because last night I was wrapping up the research that I had and I'm going over some notes and my wife looks over at the computer and she starts reading the letter that Albert Fish sent after the final murder with, what's her name?
Grace Bud?
Grace, yeah. And she's like, I could see her out of the corner of my eye, and then she's like, I had my headphones on, and she taps me on the shoulder, and I said, what's up? She's like, what are you reading?
What the fuck?
And I was like, Colton and I are doing this research on Albert Fish, and she's looking at me, and I'm like, it's a true story. True story. Like, this actually happened. And to see it, you know, we know it happens still to this day, but not to this magnitude. At this point, to move forward with, in the past, you had talked about the undead. Right? And that's what he looks at, or less dead. And he looks at in the 1919 I have, he's still killing and kidnapping kids in Washington, D.C., and it's the black and mentally disabled.
Yep. Easy to manipulate, easily missed.
Right. No one's paying attention at all.
Which we've seen play a role. I mean, one in the first gentleman that we covered, Anthony Soule. That was kind of his niche, like his thing. For a lot of serial killers, it is. That's why I know we've talked about this in the past. That's why a lot of people start out killing things like stray cats because they're everywhere and they won't be missed. Yeah. It's exactly the same concept. What's interesting is that he has no remorse at whatsoever. And I say that's interesting because like he has kids and he doesn't like that separation. I think gets really close, but he never crosses that line like we had talked about before.
Or at least we don't think
we don't know, but we know that he let his kids abuse them. And what's funny is like, I actually have a little list here that I call his self-harm tools because he loves this shit. So paddle with 9-inch nails. Fuck you, Trent Reznor. Cat of nine tails, which he made himself. And he uses more than once.
He does that one of his homicides.
Yep. Needles, which he loves. He loves needles in his scrotum and his dick and his asshole. Yeah. All fucking over the place. Just needles. He loves it. Really fucking crazy person. And then he also has a story about when he was a kid and when he was in the orphanage where they talk about these older kids lighting a horse's tail on fire and watching this horse run from the fire on his tail.
Right.
And freaking out. and bucking and being scared. And he remembers watching it being like kind of remorseful, but again, intrigued. And I think that plays a hefty role in the fact that he loved to take wool, shove it in his asshole, and light it on fire.
Yeah. Well, we see this with a lot of serial killers. Jeffrey Dahmer did the same thing. A lot of these guys start with animals. They cross that line of dissociating from themselves from the living thing that they're going to kill.
Right.
And speaking of that, that's a good segue to his first victim, right? So what do we... In 1924, he meets the young girl who he attempts to kidnap, the 8-year-old. He doesn't get... the dad intervenes... And he's spooked away, but he ends up meeting Francis McDonald, the 8-year-old boy.
Right.
And this is the one that I think really the confidence level is really springboarded into him being able to get away with it.
So I know we do a lot of this like back and forth, like real quick fucking ninja tactics. But there's one particular thing that I want to touch base on just a little bit, only because we had physically just talked about how right.
Go ahead.
Only because we had just talked about how like the this dirty bastard's getting to you,
It's
man.
good.
You gotta watch yourself. About how he couldn't cross that line with his kids. He had a really brief marriage with a lady, a Miss Estella Wilcox.
Very brief.
He was with her for a week. They were married for a week, and in that week, she was like, "You're fucking crazy. Get out of my house." There is one thing in particular that I will never ever forget, and it's a game that he liked to play with her kids called Sack of Potatoes Over, which just freaks me out so fucking bad. But this old croony gray bastard would get into this fucking house, take his clothes off basically to like his fucking boxers, and take these kids and put them over his back, face towards his back, so that they could scratch it going down the other side.
Yep.
That's fucking crazy. And then the mom was like, "This is kind of fucking weird, dude. Like, I'm not into this." Yeah. And then he tried some weird sexual shit with her that she wasn't into, and she's like, "Nah, this crosses the line. I'm out.
Done."
And then that fucking cuts it. What's interesting about this is that happened in February. All of that whole thing happened in the month of February. In July, specifically July 11th, is when he approaches Beatrice.
Yes.
Beatrice is the young girl. He's chased away from their family farm after he goes to her and offers her money to help him look for rhubarbs. So he's working on a process. You can see it happen. If he can't get you at home, which he couldn't, obviously, because Estrella, the mom, was like, "This is fucking weird.
Stay away from
a little
my
too obvious."
kids. Yeah.
He was like, "I'll just do it while you're away." So he tries to kidnap this girl. It goes horribly awry. The family chases him off the farm. It's done. 4 days later is when he gets our first victim.
Yeah. And that's the son of a police officer.
So the escalation there, it's like I said, clear.
Right.
It's clear.
And so for him, when you're looking at like Francis McDonald, the son of a police officer, he's 8 years old. And by this time, we're in the early 1900s. So 1924 is when that happens. So what they find, so at one point, you've got 250 police officers looking for this boy. They take his dad and they transfer him from one division to another so that he can assist with the investigation, which I'll tell you from a law enforcement standpoint, can be very difficult. Like
traumatic, I would imagine.
You really wouldn't want to take that officer and include him on the investigation. But again, early 1900s, policing's way different. There's some things that remain the same and we still use to this day. But he's transferred, and they ultimately find him. And this is where Albert gets the name the Gray Man, because when they're interviewing his friends, they ask him what happened to the young boy. And they say, the Gray Man took him.
Yeah. Right.
And now, I'm telling you as an investigator, that does absolutely nothing for me.
And the way they describe him, though, too, is it's purposely fit. Like, kids, like, I have a feeling that, not a feeling, but there is an adage that I've heard before that kids have a difficulty lying.
Yes.
Because they don't perceive reality quite the same way that we do yet. Some kids have an affinity for this shit. A lot of kids don't, though.
Right.
And for this particular set, they said that he was completely devoid of color.
Yes.
Completely. Down to his fucking mustache.
So what that tells me, and this is just an assumption, is that he hadn't yet killed. Up until this point, he was probably just molesting the children, and he was in that downward spiral.
This area right here.
Yeah.
As we
This
go
is where
down,
you
this
lose
area
your
right here.
soul.
This is when you decide to do some really sketchy shit.
Yeah.
And then this is your re-escalation.
Right. So with Francis McDonald, they end up finding him, and he's hanging by a tree. He's in by his suspenders, but he's strangled by his suspenders, and it was so well into his skin that the investigators at the point thought that the suspenders were actually his skin. Yeah. That's how much it had embedded.
Yeah.
Now, whether that was because of him hanging or because Albert had actually
tightened it so much. And you got to imagine if they were elastic of any kind, which I don't know if they were at this time, it would have just pulled tighter. The more the weight had settled, the more rigor mortis and stuff had settled, the more that his body had settled into it.
Right.
It would have pulled the suspenders down even further, right?
Yes.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's generally how it works. He turned
yes.
into a sack of bricks, so it just fucking bloop.
And that's exactly what happens.
So all that weight settles.
Yeah, and I've seen in my investigations, I've seen suicides by hanging, and if you're hanging by your neck does stretch.
Right.
It will stretch. In some cases, it will snap, or the bone will, but the skin, it'll just basically stretch.
Right.
That's where the suspenders come in and part of it. So right there, we're at what, 1924.
Correct.
Right.
So what's interesting about this too, and I don't know if you saw the same thing in your research, when they found Francis's body, they noted that there on his right leg was down to the hamstring. There was a chunk of just meat and skin missing, and they felt something of note. Now, I'm not an investigator, which we've discussed in the last two ones, but I am a fucking skeptic, so I think of it the same way. I'm in no way helping fucking Albert Fisher's cases. The piece of shit was executed a long time ago. He's a fucking monster. We've already established this. I don't know if he had yet attempted to take flesh from that child. And the reason I say that is we're talking about New York in the 1930s. I'm sure there were fucking dogs and shit running around all over the place. And if he was out in a spot that was like out by a hanging tree, we know for sure that if you die, let's say you die in your own house, your animals most of the time will fucking eat you.
Yes, they will.
That's just how it works. Animals are like that. They are cannibalistic in nature. If you have dogs outside, or meat eaters by nature, I guess you could say. If you have dogs or cats outside who have not eaten and they see a corpse, they're probably going to start to nibble at it. So I wonder if something had jumped up to grab this child.
Just the elements. Maybe. It could have been a bird, could have been a dog if it was too high.
Right.
There's no evidence that he actually did that with the intention to eat.
Right.
Any of that. But if you look at what he's already done,
it makes sense.
It makes sense.
No, it does. It does. I'm not going to say benefit of the doubt, but a little bit, maybe. I want to say yes. This piece of shit fucking tried to take a piece of this kid.
You're just leaving skepticism.
I want to keep it on the table. Let's not take it off the table.
Yeah.
So, dude maybe cuts into this kid's leg and maybe takes it and tries to eat it, and maybe he finds the meat to be tough, or maybe he finds the meat to be not to his liking, which escalates into something further later on.
Right. So, in 1924, that's when this occurs. Now we're going to fast forward to 27.
Real quick, but before we lose track of that, I thought this is really interesting, and I think it plays into what we were talking about before. He was painting at a site less than 3 miles away from where they found Francis's body. I feel like that's important. It's important because of the way that he's caught, I feel. But anyways.
Well, and I agree with you because, again, in all instances, he's within that area of the crime.
Right.
And we do find out later what all that comes down to, but if you're just going on archaic police work, you're looking for those connections. You're connecting those dots.
Right.
So it is significant.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. If Steve was like, I wasn't there, bullshit. You weren't, but
Dude,
3 miles down.
You were 3 miles away. You're the only person we know that likes to mutilate fucking corpses and rape kids. So, we know for sure that it's you, dude. We know it.
Right.
We just know it, right?
So, as we go forward in this timeline, and I think it was in our Eileen's last podcast that we talked about, you get a little bit more confident, right? You get away with it. He got away with the last homicide. He knows he got away with it, and he's going to do it again.
Right.
And he does. So February 11th, 1927, he takes Billy Gaffney, right?
He does. So this is where the boogeyman
Yes.
actually comes into play.
So what do we have? What names do we have at this point?
We
the
have
Gray Man,
Gray Man, and the boogeyman.
The
so
Boogeyman.
far, right?
Okay.
Werewolf Wisteria. I'm not really.
I don't know where that came
I'm not
from.
really sure about that one, but because it's weird because the house is in like Westchester or something where he goes Grace. Anyway, Billy Gaffney. I feel like this really sucks because as I was doing this research, I was sitting in my living room. On my couch and watching my son play with stuff. And like, you know, he's not very old, but at the same time, like old enough that when I read the ages of these kids, I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Billy Gaffney was 4 years old. His friend, Billy Beaton, was 3 years old. They were playing together in an apartment hallway, playing hide and seek, which, oh God, fucking timing or what? But I feel like that's just how a lot of these fucking piece of shit serial killers get away with shit. Just timing. Just fucking timing.
That's exactly
and
what it is.
It's dumb fucking luck. It's always dumb fucking luck that costs some fucking innocent person their life. Always. And it's fucking horrible. Kids are going to hide. Mr. Werewolf himself rolls into this place, grabs Mr. Billy, little Billy Gaffney, and exits.
And the little boy sees him because that's what he calls the boogeyman, right?
Little boy sees him. So when the cops show up, and I don't know how this exactly happened. I don't know if the kid freaked out or what. But when the cops show up, the kid is hiding still.
Yeah.
And he was like on the roof or something. And they asked him, you know, if he had seen anything suspicious. And he said, my friend was taken by the boogeyman.
Yeah.
Which fucking makes my skin crawl.
Right.
That really fucking bothers me because like, they're little. They're really little.
Well, you got a 3 and 4 year old, and they see this adult man. And just a quick description, because I haven't figured out how to insert pictures in the YouTube channel, but I will. By this point, he's a little older. Right. He's got a handlebar mustache. He's wearing derbies at this time. But this is where we actually see him start pushing the limits.
Right.
Because they never found his body, right? And he ultimately does confess to it, but how he confesses is in the letter.
Which, like I said before, he has an affinity for letters. In the letter, he details how he had a friend that was in the military, who was in the Navy, who was stationed off of the coast of China. They went off ship to do whatever, probably entertainment or whatever they were doing. Came back and the ship was gone. And this was back during when China was going through a severe famine.
Yes.
So China was pulling some fucking crazy shit. The natives there were doing a lot. They were mutilating fucking kids. They were taking dogs, cats, everything off the street. Anything and everything that could be eaten, they fucking ate it. And that's how they worked. They would bring meat out to you and say, hey, what kind of meat do you want? Rib meat? Do you want rump meat or whatever you want? You would just pick the meat and then they would take it and carve it off of the corpse of a child.
Yes.
Any kids that were under the age of 12 were susceptible to being caught by the Chinese government at any point in time and used for food to feed the working class.
Yes.
Because the working class, supports the government.
Yes.
That's usually how it works, which is kind of, just in the world. Anyway, so really he details that it was an unsafe place for anyone under the age of 14. I know that he said 12 and then he says 14 later, and I know he can read that on the same sheet of paper. I just really think he's a fucking horrible person and really bad at math. Anyway, he details how this gentleman makes his way back to America. They had reconvened, and he explains to him that he really enjoys the taste of human meat. Human flesh is fucking fantastic and sweet and beautiful.
Yeah.
And like we had mentioned before, this is before Albert Fish makes the jump to do that. So I feel like he knew what he wanted in the end. He wanted what his friend had. He described it to him, but he also was such a fucking piece of shit pussy that he didn't feel like he could just straight up do it. Therefore, he was feeding himself and his children the meat that he was used to by eating raw cow meat.
Yeah, right. So with this one, with Billy's murder, this is where he gets into the pushing of the limits.
Yep.
He's dismembering.
Yep.
He's creating food for himself.
Yep.
And he's also writing the letters because the predicate letter that you were talking about was sent out beforehand. He actually writes the letter for Billy with regards to how he murdered him.
Yep.
Right? He cuts off his ears.
Yep.
Cuts off his nose.
Yep.
He gouges out his eyeballs.
Yep.
By this
what's
time,
weird about the letter too is the way he describes it is he never says the child is dead until after he says he gouges out his eyes.
Yes.
In which case it's after he's already mutilated his face.
Exactly.
Which really just fucking bothers me.
Right. And then he gives him the coup de grace. He gives him the stab to the stomach. He drinks his blood.
Yeah.
So now he's every kind of crazy there is. Right? So we know he likes to be pissed on. He likes to be shit on. He likes raw meat. And now he's pushing every single limit there is.
Now he's crossed the line that you would have had to have seen coming, but almost were like hoping that he wouldn't.
Right.
If you thought that was bad, just fucking wait because he's not done with this fucking corpse yet.
Right. So it's during this time that he actually creates a stew. Now he takes part of that body. So basically what he does is he guts Billy and dismembers him, takes his arms, takes his legs, and I think he says below the knees, right?
So he cuts under the belly button and above the knees. So he takes the rump, his genitalia in the front, and his thighs and up.
Right.
And he takes that. He says he has a grip. He takes it, wraps it in newspaper as if a butcher would do it, puts it in a grip with him. We're talking about a very small child. So
right.
It doesn't need to be something big.
Big, right. Now, grip, what is he referring to?
A grip is a bag.
Just a regular
just
bag.
a bag, just a handbag, something that he can take with him, something
right.
small. And I said the same thing because I was reading. I'm like, oh, it's just something that you can hold on to with one hand, something as if you were to grip it.
Right. So this is also where he talks about the eating of the flesh, the preparation of the flesh.
Yes.
Right. So we know, which this took me a couple of days to process. Okay. He actually makes this stew. Mm-hmm. As though you would anything else.
But not only that, but he fucking details it as if he's writing for Betty fucking Crocker.
Exactly.
Which is really fucking horrific to think about.
Yeah.
He talks about taking this kid's rump and filleting it, cutting it in half and putting it in the oven. And then after 1/4 of an hour, taking water and basting it over the top of it. And then regularly, every 30 minutes after, pulling the rump from the stove and lightly tapping the buttocks to make sure that the meat is very tender.
100% Julia Child at best. Martha Stewart, he takes bacon strips, puts it on the rump.
What the fuck? Like, what the fuck? Honestly. Honestly.
That's what with this, there's so many angles that he has of pleasure. Okay? The killing of the child, the dismemberment of the child, the antagonizing letter written to the victim's mother.
Right.
Right? And then they have the letter.
What's really fucking scary about this whole thing, though, too, is like we talked about just like a perfect escalation as it goes. And you can probably see how this maybe plays out. But it went 0 to 100 real fucking quick.
Fast.
But I also want to note, because we've talked about this in the past, and we'll probably talk about it again in the future, it's how serial killers operate. They break that barrier once. They break it once. Did I really like it? I don't know. I kind of go through a little bit of denial. I don't know if I want to do it. Nah, I'm going to go ahead and fucking do it again. Boom. There's a space of time. Right. That space of time gets shorter as they go. And usually they start getting really fucking sloppy because they're trying to accomplish something that they don't know they're quite accomplishing. Right. As a side note, I will tell you, if you haven't seen it already, you should probably watch it. If you're into serial killer movies at all, watch The House That Jack Built by Lars von Trier. I just watched that here about a week ago. Definitely gonna need some eye bleach.
Yeah.
After you watch that movie.
Oh,
it's good, but it's very fucking scary, and it definitely outlines, I think, 100% accurately the escalation of a serial killer and the finding and the fine tuning of their style for their magnum opus, which segues us to.
Yeah. So again, the one thing that he talks about in this is the taste of human flesh. He puts bacon on the ass of the child, bakes it, and then gives you the recipe, right? Turnips, onions, carrots. He talks about basting the child. He actually tells you about what the penis or the monkey tastes like. He couldn't actually chew the testicles, so he throws them in the toilet.
Flushes them.
and goes from there. And again, when you're looking at this, I try to process, like, we know what Rocky Mountain oysters are, and I think to myself, people eat that shit, right? And here's this guy doing that to very small testicles. And he just like, they're too tough, get rid of them.
Yeah, fuck it. Who cares? Whereas you like have this whole thing that's not even 100 miles up the road at Rock Springs where they do that nut fry.
Right.
Every once in a while, you know?
Exactly.
Where they're just like, they have a whole fucking party.
Yeah, you
just
big sign, nut fry.
Shit. Yeah, it's fucking awesome. I've never had them before it. I don't really plan on ever doing it.
I have no
And
no
especially after this,
to.
I feel like I'm ruined. Anyway, if we move into how he disposes of the rest of the body, obviously we talked about how he takes the hindquarters essentially in the front genitalia portion and takes it, or the pelvic region, takes it, puts it in a grip, takes it home so he can cook it. He takes the rest of the body, dismembers, obviously, takes it and puts it in sacks with rocks and distributes it across different ponds in the area.
And something significant about this, which will play into Grace Budd's homicide, is it actually takes him 4 days to eat the body of Billy.
Yes.
Which, when you think about that, you wake up every day knowing you're going to eat part of a human. That's 4 times you're eating that every single time. Is he getting aroused every single time? Is he remembering what he's up against? Like, all these things are in my mind.
He's just enamored at this point. And it's obvious because when he moves on to the Grace Budd case, which is his famous case, anybody who's really into serial killers at all will recognize the Grace Budd letter. He really enters his stride. This is his preparation.
Right.
For him, this is his appetizer. This is him getting ready for the big event. And he is very much aware, which is very fucking scary. And it's obvious because of the letters he's writing. I also want to note that even though it was 3 years in gap between Francis and Billy, within that 3 years, he admits he never gave up molestation. So who knows how many kids he abused? 1. Who knows how many kids he murdered? 2. Yeah. Because he said that he murdered over 100 kids. That's what he said. But he said that he also had kids in every state, in which he talked about molestation, which police of that time claimed that it could be well over 400. They are not sure.
Right.
It's impossible to know. His lineage, or not his lineage, but his story goes all the way from New York or Washington, D.C., all the way to Wyoming and back again twice. They have no fucking clue what's going on.
None.
And that's scary.
Well, yeah.
That's fucking scary.
Especially at that time. So now let's get to what is his demise. Right? So his demise is Grace Budd. This is 1928 when he answers the ad for Edward Budd.
And I actually have the ad, which is really simple.
What does it say?
It's really simple. It's like less than 2 sentences because it's kind of choppy. It literally says, and this is May 28th, 1928, that he reads this letter. You gotta imagine. Sure.
Yeah.
Albert Fish.
Craigslist.
Drinking his coffee, hanging out, saying, young man, 18, wishes position in country, Edward Budd, 406 West 15th Street.
Very simple. Not difficult at all. Now, at the time, he doesn't know what he's answering to. But I think there's something to be said, and I think they do say it about, he gets there and he realizes that this 18-year-old is going to beat his ass if he tries to fucking
He wants the one. He knows for sure that he wants Edward Budd. Right. When he arrives at the house, Edward Budd is there, but Edward Budd's friend is there as well. And he says, well, why don't both of you come and live with me? Why don't both of you come here?
Right.
Come with me. What he claims later on is that he was kind of intimidated by them. Like he thought that they could take him. But you have to remember that this is after he had already decided on Grace, and maybe that was his justification afterwards. You know, right. A lot of people make fucked up decisions, and then afterwards they'll be like, well, this is why I did it, even though in the time they had no fucking thought in their mind. They just did it. Yeah. And then later, hindsight's 20/20, and they see a way that they can cop out, and that's what they do. He poses as another person. He claims his name is Frank Howard when he arrives at Edward Budd, or the Budd home. He was planning, obviously we talked about, he's planning to take Edward and his friend. He's posing as kind of a wealthy man, kind of somebody who has some power, has some land out in the country, which is exactly what he called for. He comes bearing strawberries and pot cheese. And they sit over lunch, and he talks with Edward's parents. And it's this time that he sees Grace. Grace is small child.
8, right?
8 years old, I think. 8. Grace Bud comes to him, sits on his lap. They eat lunch and do his thing, and she pecks him on the cheek. I'm guessing when somebody's like, "Oh, give me a kiss," because he's such a fucking creeping weirdo.
Right.
And that's when he makes up his mind that even though he was here for this man and his friend, that he's going to take this little girl instead.
Right.
Because
Now,
she's enamored by him.
Yeah, and so at this point
seems.
is where we work on the grooming. Not just of Grace, but of the family. Because he takes out a wad of money. And that wad of money is $92.50.
Which in this day's money...
That's a lot of fucking money back then. Right? So he asks Grace if she can count or how good she can count. And she counts out the money. And when she counts it out correctly, he gives her a 50-cent piece, which is a lot for this young girl.
So they're thinking, man, this guy's loaded.
Yeah.
We better do everything he says so we can make sure that our family is taken care of, or our son or our daughter's taken care of.
So it's during this conversation, clearly he's in the house, and he talks to the elderly buds and says he wants the boys to work for him, but he's going to leave because he has to go to a birthday party.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, because there's a little bit of a gap. So he does say he's going to leave. He says he can't take them today, and he's going to come back. And I think that he already made up his mind on Grace at this point.
Absolutely.
But I feel like over the 3 days is when he prepared. It's when he found the house in Westchester. It's when he put together his instruments or his implements of hell, which was a thing, and really decided on exactly what he was going to do with her. I feel like during that 3-day gap, that's what happened. When he arrived claiming he was going to pick up the sons, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't take your kids with me again. But I do want to tell you that my niece is having a birthday party this evening, and I would love to take your daughter with me."
Yeah. Which the woman bud has problems with this.
At first.
Right? The father bud is okay with it.
Which is, to me, like...
Which is weird.
Weird. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Like, I don't know that I'm okay with sending my daughter...
Not saying the mom is wrong. Not saying that the dad is wrong in any way. But obviously, one of them was moved more than the other. And one of them had sensed something kind of weird. Yeah. And I'm not going to say anything about... It's not anything against sexes or anything how that works. But I'm just saying that...
Mom's intuition is always right.
He was better with men. We knew this.
Yes.
To start with.
Yeah. So he convinces them to let him take Grace. He tells them that the party's on 137th Street, right? And Columbus.
Which we know where they are because I already gave you the ad. It's a 15th Street. So we're talking 100 and some odd blocks.
100. Well, Columbus ends
almost
at
110th.
110th.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what they find out later. Now, there's a big gap that in 7 years from the time that he takes Grace...
to when the letter arrives.
But we know that he's already lied to the family. He's taking Grace, and that's the last time Grace's mom sees her. It's at that point that he takes Grace to the house in Westchester, right? Which I agree. I think he had already scoped it out. He knew it was vacant and there was no problems.
And what's funny is that like there are pieces where they talk about, or what he has talked about in confession, that on the train he actually forgot his fucking implements of hell, quote unquote, which was a meat cleaver, a butcher's knife, and a fucking bone saw or a handsaw, which he left on the train. He actually forgot them, and he asked Grace to go back and grab them. Grace actually walked back into the fucking train and grabbed these implements and brought them back to him when they were offloading on the train on their way to fucking Westchester, which just makes that even more fucking heartbreaking.
Right. So, he's got her. At this point, he's got her. And I know in the movie The Gray Man, which I saw many years ago, they show Grace. He calls her up from her picking up flowers, and she goes up to the stairs. And at that point, the door closes. Now, According to police reports and him, he hides in a closet naked.
Naked. He takes all of his clothes off because he already knows, one, that he's going to kill her, and he
Right.
doesn't want to get blood all over his body.
Correct. So he grabs her. The fight's on. This comes out in the letter that he writes later. The fight's on, and he ends up strangling her. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So he ends up strangling her, and then he uses her instruments of death to dismember her. But the thing is that, and this is something that is kind of odd at this point. We know he's a child molester.
Right.
He's an admitted child molester, but he doesn't rape.
And it's funny because I was kind of looking over this because I want to read exactly a little bit of the letter. I do have it in my notes. There's a small section that I want to read out loud so that way you kind of understand how this guy writes his letters. I know we've talked about it, but we haven't really told you how he describes it. It's fucking brutal. It's fucking brutal. There's no way around it. It's completely fucking brutal, and it's horrible. But he describes everything. What's even worse, I think, than fucking anything else is he writes this letter after this girl is killed and sends it to her house. And her mom is illiterate, so the son that was almost taken has to read the letter out loud to his mother, who is grieving over a child she lost, which is just fucking horrifying to me. But it just shows you that this dumb fucking asshole got away with all of it and did it all by chance. It wasn't like it just happened. And it just happened that it hit this family so fucking hard because it was circumstantial. That's so fucking horrible. If you'd like, I can read this little section.
Go ahead.
If you want me to. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked, how she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook it, and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was, roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though. I could have, had I wished. She died a virgin.
She died a virgin. Yes.
Why? Just to fucking hurt someone.
I think it's torment at that point. He's in full control. Even if he gets caught, he's in full control of what is disseminated and what is not. Right? So we know that he's got this, the letter's written, and this letter is what brought the motherfucker down.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. And this, I was so excited. I was like, damn. Fucking Cisco's gonna have a good fucking time with this part. Because this is gonna be fucking rad because it just shows like intuition, 1, 2, good fucking police work.
Yeah.
Just good fucking police work. Even in the 1930s, this is fucking stellar. So dude sends the letter to the mom. But on the letter is a stamp with the initials NYPCBA. Which is the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association, which is a very mouthy thing to wrap your mind around. It really is.
Yeah.
Come to find out, a janitor who was working for this benevolent association had taken some stationery with him to a boarding home.
He stole it.
Right. And he had it in a room in a boarding home that he was living in. When he moved out, he left the paper in this place.
Yes.
Albert Fish moved into this place. Albert Fish then proceeded to write, if I'm not mistaken, 1, maybe even 2 of the letters from there.
Yes. I think he wrote 2 of them.
I think he did. I'm not 100% sure because I know that the letter for Billy didn't come out until after. But they fucking knew. They traced it back. They said, man, they called the landlord of this place and they said, hey, we're looking for this gentleman that has this thing or that has, stationery from whatever. The janitor claims that he took it to this house. That's the only place that it could have been. That's the only way that it could have made its way out. They trace it back to this room exactly where he left.
Yeah.
There is a gentleman by the name of Albert Fish who is living in a room who had left 3 days prior but had yet to return. There was money waiting for him sent to him by his son that the landlord was holding, so we knew he was coming back. And the detective was like, I'm going to wait in the hallway.
3 weeks. 3 weeks they wait for this guy. And they end up pulling the surveillance off because he doesn't show up. But the best part about this isn't high-tech technology that catches him. This is a detective who's fucking pissed off, who's not going to stop and do old-fashioned police work.
Sees a good lead, and he's going to fucking see it through
Right,
to the end.
because he ultimately shows the picture of the gray man to the hotel person, right? And she says, oh, that's Albert Fish.
Hey, man, that's that guy. He's
Yeah, I
got
know
money.
that
Hey, wait
guy.
for him. He'll be on his way back.
Right. So for him, you know, as an investigator in the past, when you start putting these pieces together and you're waiting for that last piece, that last nugget that comes out, and you know, I've got him because he signed the letter to Albert Fish, right? So he knows he's coming back. When he comes back, he sees him in the lobby area, and he looks at him and questions, Albert Fish?
Do you mind if I take you in and question you at the headquarters?
Because you're fucking guilty.
We got you, motherfucker.
Exactly.
Albert Fish agrees, turns and pulls a blade.
Right.
I love how every story describes it as he disarmed Albert Fish. In my head, I would like to think that guy just beat Albert Fish's ass. Just fucking crushed him in that fucking house.
Yeah, because back then, they had saps. And if you don't know what a sap is, that's a straight ass-beating mechanism, right? A metal pipe in there, and you're just beating his ass till he drops the fucking razor
And I hope
blade.
that's what happened. I hope they pull the blade, they fucking hit him, and just beat the shit out of him until he was submissive.
Ass. So now they've got him in custody for the Grace Budd murder.
Which he confesses to, no holds barred.
Yes.
Dude just straight up admits to all of it as if he has no remorse whatsoever.
Yeah.
I did it. This is what I did. I sent a letter to the mother. You'll find that I really don't have any feelings towards this type of scenario.
He has none. And in the pictures from the crime scene, they find the butcher knife, Grace Budd's skull, right? They show the house and they show the outhouse. But, you know, they did minimize it, and maybe it was that minimal, but it says wrestled away the razor blade. But I'm like you. I think they beat the shit out of him.
I would fucking hope.
To get that shit back.
I would hope that they fucking beat the shit out of him.
Right.
What's funny is that this is when he talks about, when he confesses that he says that he originally planned to take Edward and his friend, but that he didn't. In the beginning, we talked about how much it mattered that he was into the weirdest sexual shit and that he got rock hard when people were fucking beating him and all this stuff. This matters, and the reason that it matters is he says that when he attacked Grace Budd, it wasn't sexually driven. However, when he was strangling her to death, he was in the nude, had his knee on her chest, and had his hands around her throat.
Yes.
And he came twice involuntarily.
Yes.
Twice.
And I believe
that is some shit.
Yeah. And when they interviewed him, they asked him, why didn't you rape her? And he said, I didn't think about it.
He didn't. Yeah, he said at the time, it wasn't what I thought I wanted.
Right.
Fuck that. Fuck this guy. Fuck this whole fucking situation. It's so fucking brutal. Like, it just gets worse. It isn't like it gets better. It just gets fucking worse. And his last words are so fucking irritating. But again, my favorite quote from him, and just because it shows how fucking crazy and how ignorant and fucking just total by the seat of his pants he flew the entire time.
Yeah. But he pushes the limit. So we know now he's in custody for this Grace Budd murder. March 11th, 1935, he goes on trial.
Correct.
All of the doctors are saying he's insane. They're trying to spare him the death penalty.
They did a test to see what exactly it was that he was fetishizing.
Right.
What they found was that he had fetishes that fit the bill of 18 different conditions that they have listed. All of which they claimed helped plead insanity for him.
Yes.
However, he was in prison at this time.
Yeah.
He was transported in prison in the beginning of 1935. They pulled prison guards from him and prison doctors and prison psychiatrists to come and talk about him during his trial.
Yeah.
What I think is really interesting about this is that they pulled the guards. What's weird is that they said that these people have no evidence or no knowledge of psychology. Why are they here? And they said, because I've watched him masturbate to the weirdest shit.
Yeah.
And that's just,
Well,
I can
that
tell
fucking
you
matters.
that he's conscious.
You're right.
He knows what he's thinking about. He knows what he's doing. And he fucking just does it.
Does it? Yeah. And part of, during this incarceration, he takes a chicken bone, sharpens it, and stabs himself. Now, there's two sides of this coin. My side is that he just wanted pleasure.
Yeah.
Other people say he tried to kill himself.
No.
At my side is he wanted the pleasure of the fucking pain.
I agreed with you.
Because he knows
He likes pain. He likes to bleed. And he likes to
Exactly.
feel the most fucked up shit on the planet. And what do you do after you have 19 needles in your ball sack? You stab yourself with a bigger fucking
with
needle.
a chicken bone.
This is what you do.
Yeah. And ultimately later on, as we close this case, we find out that I think that it proves that he wasn't trying to kill himself. He just wanted pleasure because of what he says about the electric chair. So he goes on trial March 11th, 1935. It's during this time that they're trying to fight for him. So we know on January 16th, 1936 at 11:06, they walk him into the electric chair.
It's true.
3 minutes later, they electrocute that motherfucker.
He's pronounced dead.
He's done.
11:09. Dead as a motherfucker.
Dead. And I'm gonna let this, I'm gonna leave this to you because I know you want to say it. What were his last words before he fucking died?
I have no idea why I'm here.
Fuck
this guy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Fuck this fucking guy.
This is a mistake.
Fuck this stupid motherfucker. I don't care. He seems to think that even at the fucking grave that he's totally innocent and everything is fine. Fuck this guy. Seriously, just fuck this guy. Fuck him. Fuck this guy. I'm gonna fuck
You're
I'm
done.
outta here. I'm
Goes
fucking
out.
outta here.
All right.